Greetings, everyone. If you teach listening skills to ESL students, either in a classroom or one-on-one as a tutor, I'm sure you have confronted two big issues. Now, one issue is trying to find materials that are at the right level for your students, meaning the speakers don't speak too fast or they don't use too big a vocabulary or too complex of sentences. But at the same time, for advanced students, you're going to be looking for materials that they do speak faster, normal speed with big vocabulary. So that's one challenge. Then the other challenge is to try to find materials that are actually interesting to the students. So not only at the right level, but also interesting. So in this video, I'm going to demonstrate a technique that you can easily use to meet both of those challenges. And best of all, it doesn't take special skills for the teacher, or it doesn't take much preparation. And here's a bonus. It's not going to cost your students anything. First, about materials. I'm going to tell you something counterintuitive. Usually teachers start by thinking about the student's level of listening. So if they're teaching like high beginners, they go through a bunch of books and they're trying to find, okay, is this vocabulary too hard? Is the speaker talking too fast? And things like that. And then after they found books that they think are at the right level, then they start thinking about, okay, what in this is interesting? Can I find something that's really interesting for the students? So for this, the technique I'm going to show you, we're going to do the opposite. First, we're going to look for something that's very interesting to the students, some listening passage. We don't worry about the level. And, the listening passage can be news, current events, it can be sports, it could be something from an audiobook, it could be a lecture. Now, here's the key to how this works. The students do not have to understand what the speaker on the recording is saying. Okay, instead, they are going to listen to you tell them in English that is at their level what the speaker has said about this interesting topic. So as Krashen's input hypothesis states, we want listening passages to be at the level that's slightly above the student's current level of listening. And we can do that with just about any listening passage. Teachers who have used this technique have told me how much fun and rewarding it is because they know the students are interested in this material. They're interested in the topic, and they genuinely want to know what are the speakers saying. So now I'll demonstrate how this technique works. And I'm going to do it with on two videos. So this video is part one, and I'm going to show you how you can do this with an audio recording. And then in part two, I'll show you how you can do it with a video. So originally, the one I'm going to show you today, I'm going to play for you today, this passage, I used with a low intermediate college age group of students. And they were interested in social media. But you'll soon see that I am able to use this very same passage with students from any level and from any age group. I started by telling them that they were going to hear about some research. The researchers wanted to find out if social media makes people sadder. And I say, don't worry if you don't understand what the speaker said. I want you to try to understand what I tell you the speaker said. And then I start the recording.
Many studies have shown that people who use social media frequently appear to be unhappier than those who don't.
So here I stop the recording and I told them what the speaker just said. I said, some people use social media like Facebook and some people don't. And some researchers said that they think people who don't use social media are happier than people who do. And notice, I don't read from a script. I had listened to this recording before class, and I thought about kind of how I was going to phrase things to them. So I'm just telling what we heard at their level, at their speed. And so you can see that the teacher's preparation really is pretty minimal. So then we continue with the recording.
But until recently, it was impossible to say whether this was correlation or causation. Do lonely people spend more time on social media in an effort to escape their loneliness, or is social media itself causing people to feel isolated?
But we don't know if social media makes people unhappy. Maybe some people are just unnaturally happy, and those people use social media. And people who are just naturally happy don't use it. Maybe some people are sad and use social media because they're feeling lonely.
So, researchers at Tel Aviv University wanted to test whether spending time on Facebook actually made people feel worse. They happened on what psychologists call a natural experiment. A security firm in Israel decided to restrict the Facebook use of its employees. No one was allowed to use Facebook at all for security reasons. The employees had to delete their accounts if they wanted to continue working for the company.
So the researchers found the perfect situation. There was a company in Israel, and they didn't want anybody to take their secrets, and so they told all their employees they had to stop using Facebook. And they said if an employee didn't want to stop using Facebook, then they would be fired. In other words, they would lose their jobs. You can see how I was able to make this rather advanced content, which is highly interesting to the students right at their level. And I didn't include, or I only included information that they needed to get the point. I didn't include things like, I didn't tell them that the researchers were from Tel Aviv University. And, I didn't say that this firm that was part of the research was a security firm. Now, here's the beauty of this technique is that these students were low intermediate level students, but I can use the same recording, the same listening material with a different level and with different age groups. So all I'd have to do for like lower level students, I would just have to speak a little bit slower, maybe change some of the vocabulary, shorter sentences. But with advanced level students, I could tell them more details, and I could speak a little bit faster, and I could use more advanced vocabulary and grammar style. So for example, let's say I'm going to tutor a 30-year-old immigrant woman. She's got an advanced education. She's a doctor, let's say. But her English is lower level. So here's how I could use this same recording And you'll notice I speak a little bit slower and I use shorter sentences. Again, I'm not reading a prepared transcript when I tell her what the tape said.
That people who use social media frequently appear to be unhappier than those who don't.
So the speaker says some people who use social media, it can be bad for them. It can make people feel unhappy. Do you understand?
But until recently, it was impossible to say whether this was correlation or causation. Do lonely people spend more time on social media in an effort to escape their loneliness, or is social media itself causing people to feel isolated?
But we don't really know if social media makes people sadder. You know, some people are just sad people, right? And so maybe those people like social media because it just makes them feel better. Now, here is what I would do with advanced level students. And as you will see, I am able to play longer sections and I can tell them more details. I even add some information and I use bigger vocabulary and I'm going to talk, you know, at a more natural speed for these advanced students.
Many studies have shown that people who use social media frequently appear to be unhappier than those who don't. But until recently, it was impossible to say whether this was correlation or causation. Do lonely people spend more time on social media in an effort to escape their loneliness, or is social media itself causing people to feel isolated?
So there are some studies that show people who use social media tend to be unhappier than those who don't use it. But we don't know if this is just a correlation. Here's an example of a correlation. There was a resort town that was on a lake. And during summer, it's very popular with tourists. And two things happen often. One, during the summer, ice cream sales go up. And also, crime rate goes up. And maybe it's because, you know, these are tourists there who aren't real careful about where they have their wallets or where they have their cell phones, and the crime goes up where people steal their wallets and cell phones. So these two things happen, but we don't say, oh, ice cream caused crime rates to go up. No, it's just a correlation. Both of these things just happen at the same time. So it's not a cause and effect. So researchers don't know if social media actually causes unhappiness, or is it just a correlation that sad people use social media? In other words, there are people who are unhappy or sad, and they just tend to use social media to make themselves feel less unhappy and sad.
So, researchers at Tel Aviv University wanted to test whether spending time on Facebook actually made people feel worse. They happened on what psychologists call a natural experiment. A security firm in Israel decided to restrict the Facebook use of its employees. No one was allowed to use Facebook at all for security reasons. The employees had to delete their accounts if they wanted to continue working for the company.
So he said that researchers wanted to find out if social media caused people to be unhappy. You know, researchers do experiments in labs, or they set up experiments somewhere. But this is exciting because they found a situation that was just a natural experiment. So I would continue then explaining, the rest of this passage, this segment. But as you can see, I was able to add more details. I was able to use bigger vocabulary, and I could talk faster to these advanced level students. So depending on the level of your students, you may want to explain some vocabulary, some key vocabulary in advance. You could write it on the board, just some of these words, or if you're tutoring, you could just write it on a piece of paper, and maybe a word, depending on the level, you might want to write, social media or security firm. So after using this technique with a segment, it's a good idea to check how well their understanding was with some comprehension questions. And you can easily do this by having them take out a piece of paper and then ask the questions, and they can write their answers. Or if you're tutoring, you just ask the question and the student can tell you what the answer is. So for example, true or false. Number one, this recording is about social media. Number two, researchers wanted to know if watching TV made people sadder. And then for advanced level students, you could give them short answer questions like, why did the company in Israel not want their employees to be using Facebook? So that concludes part one. So as I mentioned in part two, I'll show you how all the different ways that you can use this technique with videos. For example, any documentary or a movie, lecture, YouTube video. So this first one, like I said, is for just for listening passages, and again, that can be anything that has a recording. It can be, from the internet. It can be a podcast. Oh, I almost forgot. If you think your students would be interested in reading about does social media make people sadder, I put together a short reading passage and a little discussion exercise that you can use with your students for free. I'll put the link in the notes below. So thank you for watching this part one, and I'll see you soon in part two.